It's Ashleigh from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and welcome back to my channel where I make a lot of cake and cookie decorating tutorials, as well as give a lot of baking business tips. So we are going through a bit of a heat wave right now, so this beach cake is honestly so perfect for that. Now what is not so perfect is trying to apply buttercream when it is really hot. So what I did was I crumb coated that cake, and I didn't show that in this video, but if you want to check out how to crumb coat your cakes, you can check that out in the right hand corner. And what I'm doing now is after I crumb coated that cake, I left it in the fridge for a very long time. When you are trying to work on cakes in incredibly high heat, it's so important that you do this. Then I put on an extra layer of Italian meringue buttercream, and you notice that I only did it on half of the cake here. The other half is still exposed. I'm going to be covering up that other side with all of those beautiful blue waves. So if you want to make this a little bit more contrasting, you can run a comb through it like I am, or you can just leave it nice and smooth. The next thing I'm doing here is I'm just taking my spatula and running it along the bottom here. Don't be afraid to wipe off your cake board later on. I find it's actually a lot easier to do once everything is solidified. Now I'm going to be using these two different colors. First, I'm going to be starting off with the sky blue AmeriColor. But before I apply any coloring whatsoever, I actually just like to layer this in white first. Reason being is because if I try and mix all the color in together, I find that everything becomes a little bit too homogeneous, so I definitely want it to have a little bit more difference. And I am constantly breaking the rules of cake decorating and doing whatever works. So I'm just kind of applying that color directly on my spatula, and notice I'm just rubbing it in together. Some of you have mentioned that you find it a little bit more tricky to have your colors mixed in with your Italian meringue buttercream or Swiss meringue buttercream, but I just think you really have to keep going and make sure that you're using gel food colorings. If you're not a fan of gel food coloring, you can use powdered food coloring. However, you won't be able to do kind of this painting technique with it. You will need to mix it in first and then kind of paint with it by using different shades and add on more white frosting. Now I'm switching up my spatula so that I can create different textures all over this. I just found that my other spatula was a little bit too big, so this little spatula gives me a little bit more control. Now we're going to add on the sand. Some people do this with brown sugar or brown sprinkles or gold sprinkles, but I just find it a little bit too sweet. So I am going to add on these graham cracker crumbs. Now you can just get graham crackers and pulverize them yourself. However, I just want to skip that extra step, so I rather just purchase the crumbs themselves. These are also great to make quick and easy no-bake pies. You can choose to do this however you would like, but if you would like more sand, you can definitely put this further up onto that white portion, or you can just do a little border like I did. Now I'm also putting it on the top of my cake as well. I wasn't sure what I was going to do on the top at first, which is why I didn't have it on here in the first place, but I decided that I do want this on top too. Now what I'm doing is I'm going completely tipless with this bag, and this is not a tipless bag, but I'm not really having to make perfect lines or anything, so I just decided to cut off the tip for expediency. Then I'm making all of these squiggly lines, and all I have in here is just some regular white buttercream. When it comes to this, the more free-flowing and the more messy, the better it will turn out. The next thing you want to do is take a hard bristled brush. It is important that it's a little bit hard so you can actually see those lines dragging through, as these are supposed to be the waves. So you're just going to continue on that process all along the cake. And this is what I love about modern cakes. A lot of cakes that we're seeing right now, a lot of the trends are going towards a messy buttercream texture. You're also seeing a lot of fondant textures as well. I'm noticing this more and more, especially in wedding cakes. Now, I used to mess up this brushing technique all the time, and it really has to do with the consistency of your buttercream. It also has to do with how thick you put that line on in the first place and where you end up dragging it. So definitely play around with this, and what's great is if you make a mistake on this portion of the cake, there is no such thing as a mistake on here. You can just brush it through and try again, or scrape it off and try again. So here I have my seashell beach themed molds, and these are for chocolate, but I am going to be using them for fondant. However, this tutorial is great if you don't want to have fondant on your cake, because you could easily replace this portion with a white chocolate. You'll notice that I'm actually putting a little bit of luster dust right into the cavity. If you were to do this with chocolate, I suggest you actually brush it afterwards with a nice fluffy dry brush and some luster dust on there, because you're going to get a much better coating on that chocolate using that technique. I'm actually utilizing the luster dust here almost like a cornstarch. It allows for that fondant to slip out a little bit more easily, and it also adds a really subtle color. Now, if you're having a lot of trouble removing this from the actual mold, then what you can do is you can place it in the freezer for a little bit and it'll pop right out. Now, you're probably wondering, why don't you just use a fondant mold? And honestly, I really just should, but this is what I have on hand, so that's what I'm going to use. And I know a lot of us out there don't have every single tool, so it's good when you can use the same thing for multiple uses. If you've seen some of my older videos, it might seem like I'm going really, really slow, but all of this cake decorating is actually in real time. I was often speeding up a lot of my cake decorating, so I'm trying something new by slowing things down so you guys can see things a little bit more clearly. And now that my camera can actually pick up on a lot of those details, I think you'll be able to find it a little bit more easier to follow along. Now I'm going to be using some of these edible pearls and I'm just going to place them haphazardly along the cake. Now I'm really just doing a very, very simplistic cake, but you can honestly add so much to this base. You can do mermaid cakes with this, shark cakes, whatever you would like. Now I'm finishing up some more of those waves on top, just generously piping wherever I see fit. Now I did try to make sure that all of the waves were following the same direction, just so that it made a little bit more sense. But honestly, whatever way you put them, it's probably still going to convey that message of the beach and a bunch of waves. I think under the sea cakes or anything to do with water and sand and sun is some of my favorite types of cakes to decorate. But I really haven't done that many in my lifetime. I would say probably under 10. Now this is the stage where I try to make sure I fill in all the gaps and I debate between adding a whole bunch more or just leaving it simplistic. And sometimes I have great difficulty just leaving it super simple. So I often get the question of whether or not you could use different mediums to decorate your cakes or complete some of the same designs that I've done on my channel. And the answer is you can and you can't. So for example, for this particular cake, a Swiss or an Italian meringue buttercream is going to work just fine. American buttercream is going to work really well too. You can try and use things like whipped cream or a ganache for this, but you probably won't get the same definition in those waves. If you're going to use a ganache, I would go with a 3-to-1 ratio, but I've never actually tried it out with this particular design. Now let's get into the pricing of this cake. So this is a pretty straightforward cake design. Pretty much anything that's going to have a little bit more detail than just straight iced is going to run you a minimum of $120. I know I showed you guys a drip cake the other day that was $95, a little bit more simplistic, but this particular one, there is a little bit more finesse that's involved, so that is why it's $120. Also, I know a lot of you guys are like, wow, that's really expensive, and I don't think I'd be able to sell my cakes at that pricing. Well, we live in a very expensive province, so that is why you'll notice that things are a lot more expensive on my channel. And one last little note, everything is in Canadian dollars. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can be part of the Sweetie fam. Right now, I'm uploading weekly, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when I upload. Also, be sure to comment, request, or ask a question. I love hearing from you guys.